Welcome to Everyday Martial Artist, a weekly podcast where you'll join me, Brian Doucette, as I interview a different martial artist each episode and hear their story. Some guests you may have heard of, and some you probably haven't. Be sure to subscribe where all your favorite podcasts are available. Also visit our website at everydaymartialartist.com. If you're listening for a specific interview, I sure hope you'll stay and check out the other episodes. A very special thank you to Topher Williams for our custom theme music. And now, the newest episode of Everyday Martial Artist. Everyday Martial Artist is brought to you by KOOnline.com for all your martial arts needs. Sparring and safety gear, rank belts, uniforms, weapons, patches, and more. Wholesale supplies made by martial artists for martial artists. Visit us today at ko-online.com. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Everyday Martial Artist. I'm your host, Brian Doucette, and as we do every week, we're joined by a brand new guest talking about their background and their journey throughout the world of martial arts and everything else they're involved in. My guest today is not only a martial artist, but an actor, an author, a comedian, an entrepreneur, and much more. He's written numerous books, including his brand new release, Way of the Cobra. He's appeared on TV shows like General Hospital, Young and the Restless, Bold and the Beautiful, and many movies, including a new one that just came out October 8th with Bruce Willis called Survive the Game. He has a degree in political science, collects baseball cards, hey, me too. And many of my listeners will remember his iconic role as karate's bad boy Mike Barnes in Karate Kid 3. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Sean Kanan. How you doing today, sir?
Hey, Brian, how are you?
I'm doing good. It's a day off of my regular job and doing my side hustle jobs, working on the podcast.
And you're spending it talking to me. We got to get you some new hobbies, pal.
Well, like you said, hey, I also collect baseball cards. I haven't done it in a while, but I got about 30 to 40,000 cards from the early 60s to late 80s, early 90s.
Wow,
but
that's amazing.
Yeah,
that's a side hustle.
Yeah.
It's amazing over the past couple decades, just how valuable they've all become.
Yeah, I need to sell them, actually. I really should. I don't do it anymore. And my first side hustle when I was 16, me and a friend opened a baseball card shop in high school. So
wow.
That's kind of how I got into the hobby and everything. But
it's ambitious. Cool.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation. But like we do with all my guests, what we like to do is go back to the beginning. I want to know, where was that first spark? What led you to martial arts? Was it, what age? Was it your parents? Was it your decision? And kind of what was it that drew you in and made you stick with it?
When I was a kid growing up in Western Pennsylvania, I wanted to get into boxing. And so I found a gym in, I think it was like the south side of Youngstown, Ohio. And I went there a couple times. And I think very quickly my parents discerned that the guys that were boxing at this gym were boxing to get out of a really bad socioeconomic situation. This was probably not the place for me to be doing that. They're nice son from the suburbs of Pennsylvania. So they said, okay, listen, why don't you try karate? And I really didn't know a whole lot about it other than, having seen Bruce Lee movies and things like that. And a couple of the guys that worked for my dad had been studying at this dojo in my hometown. And I remember one of them brought some pictures in and showed me, all these incredible kicks they were doing. And I was like, this looks pretty cool. And so when I was, I guess I was about 14, I first stepped foot into a dojo, and I was just enamored from right away. It was a Shotokan dojo. Nice. So it was very traditional Japanese. It was definitely not a McDojo. This was, a lot of, discipline, tradition, all the stuff that I needed as a kind of unruly 14-year-old kid. And it came along at just a fortuitous point in my life. I really needed to get that kind of structure. I had experienced a lot of bullying when I was younger. I really lacked discipline. I lacked a lot of the stuff that, I think most kids at that age really need. And so I just loved it. And after a couple of years, our dojo merged with the Japan Karate Federation, which was Sensei Fumio Demura's organization. Coincidentally, Fumio Demura was Pat Morita's stunt double in the Karate Kid films.
Right.
And years later, that played a really important and pivotal role in my ultimately getting the part of Mike Barnes.
Okay.
So it's weird. It's like looking back on it. Um, it seems like my joining that specific dojo really changed the trajectory of my life, both personally and professionally.
Wow. Now, what was it about that? Can you think of that, your first instructor? What kind of stood about that? I mean, obviously, overall, you love the whole thing. What was it? One or two things about your instructor that stood out that really, even to this day, you still kind of remember?
Well, my instructor was Sensei William Stoner.
Okay.
He passed away a few years ago. I was actually just back in my hometown of Newcastle, Pennsylvania, for a martial arts tournament and banquet honoring him. And he was a hard ass. He was a take no BS guy. He was a very serious and committed martial artist. And like I said, the regimentation and the discipline in the dojo was very strict, and it was exactly what I needed. And he also, for as intimidating and often harsh as he could be, I told him about my dreams to become an actor, and he was one of the few people that didn't laugh at me. Oh. And he took the conversation really seriously and said, well, you're kind of supposed to go into your father's family business. We had a family business of jewelry stores. We had at one time 52 of them. So it was a pretty significant business. And I was the only son, and I had worked in the stores growing up, but it just, wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. And so I had this conversation with Sensei Stoner, and he said, listen, if this is what you want to do, man, you need to go for it. And it really gave me some of the confidence I needed early on. I mean, let's face it, you say to anybody, hey, I'm going to go move out to Hollywood and become an actor. That's like saying, I'm going to go, join the circus as the strong man. I mean, it's just absurd.
True.
I mean, the odds are incredibly stacked against you.
Right.
I wasn't in New York. I wasn't in Los Angeles. I was in Western Pennsylvania, not known as being a hub for the entertainment industry. And, my parents were, they were like, what are you talking about? I mean, they ultimately have been two of my biggest champions, but, they were set on their son going to college and becoming some kind of a professional. And, I needed that encouragement early on, I think, to be able to start to put myself in the mindset that I was going to do something that was very much the road not taken. And I will always be thankful to Sensei Stoner and martial arts for helping, giving me some of the, I guess tenacity is the right word. There were two teachers that I've had in my life that have toughened me up and have given me a lot of the wherewithal that I needed to pursue a career in acting. One was my Sensei Stoner, and the other was one of my very early acting teachers, the late Roy London.
Very cool. Now, you mentioned Shotokan. I studied that when I was in high school, and the one thing that always stood different from you with Shotokan, that was the first martial art I ever got to even knew what it was and got to use a Makiwara board. Did they have that in your school?
The old Makiwara boards.
Yeah.
My knuckles still bear the scars.
Yes. I remember the first time I saw one, I'm like, we just punch it? Really?
Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming that most of the people who listen to this are martial artists, but for those people who don't, it's a piece of wood wrapped with rope that you punch repeatedly to condition your knuckles. And as I learned it, one of the reasons that the Okinawans trained with that, the farmers, was to be able to punch through the samurai's armor.
Right. I've read that too. Yep. So now you mentioned Sensei Demura. Now, did you also start when the school merged? Did you start training in Shitoryu?
Well, we converted to that. Yes.
Okay.
So we did convert to that, and I have taken a few classes with Sensei Demura, but he was in California in Santa Ana. So we would see him. He would come a couple times a year to our dojo. My relationship with Sensei Demura really began to grow once I became a part of the Karate Kid family. Okay. I would see him more frequently, and I was just with Sensei Demura at this event for my late sensei. He was there, so I just saw him a couple months ago. But he's had a really profound effect on me. He was gracious enough to agree to appear in my second book, which is called Success Factor X, where
Nice.
My co-author and I went out to 50 exceptional people and said, what is your advice about success? And Sensei Demuro was one of them, because he is certainly somebody who I think embodies tremendous success.
Oh yeah.
And, very, very honored to know somebody of his amazing caliber.
Yeah, he actually agreed to do the show, so I'm beyond excited, looking forward to that interview.
Yeah, he's
exciting.
He's terrific, and I can't say enough about him.
So, reading about your past in martial arts, and you studied multiple other styles. First of all, I'd like to know a little about those styles, but also as your career grew and started expanding and getting more busy, how did you find time, and did you make time to train?
There've been times in my life that I've trained. There's been times that I haven't trained. I have trained fairly extensively in American kickboxing with an instructor in Venice, California, named Christopher Steele.
Okay.
I've trained. I studied privately, training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for about a year. I studied with Grandmaster Daryl Vidal of the Karate Kid.
Nice.
Yeah,
okay.
Daryl teaching me Filipino stick and knife fighting. And what else? Did some Krav Maga. I've got kind of a little smattering of a bunch of different styles, and I've really been waiting for two things to happen to seriously re-engage in my training. One is I have had a pretty significant rotator cuff injury for a while now, and I've been rehabbing it, but I'm not ready to go back into training full time. And the other is, with the pandemic and everything, it really put the kibosh on everything for a while. Definitely. But I very much want to get back into training. I never got my black belt, and that's something that it's not about, I want to get a black belt, so I have a black belt to wear, but it's a sense of accomplishment and commitment that I want to re-engage in. When I thought about it, ultimately it boils down to excuses, because if I really had wanted to do it, I would have found a way to continue while doing all the other stuff that I've done. And so I would like to do that. I don't know if did you read the article that I wrote for Black Belt Magazine?
Which one? I'm sure I probably did.
So you should probably check it out. I wrote it. Okay, let me back up. So I have a friend now whose name is Sensei Adam McKinley. And Adam posts these amazing TikTok videos on TikTok and Instagram of him doing these kicks. And so I was watching this guy, and I sort of sought him out, started communicating with him. We developed sort of a friendship through texting, and then it grew from there. And he said, "Hey, listen, why don't you come up to Northern California and train with me?"
I did read that.
And
article.
so I called.
I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you read it. Okay. Yep. So I called Robert Young up, the editor of Black Belt Magazine. And I said, "Hey buddy, listen, I don't know if I'm having a midlife crisis or what, but I'm going to go sight unseen to this guy that I've never met in the mountains and woods of Northern California and go train with him." And he's like, "Well, I think that'd be a really great article." And I said, "I do too." And so I went up and stayed with Adam and his lovely family for a week and trained. And he then came to visit me in Pennsylvania for Sensei Stoner's event that I was telling you about. Okay. And I'm just waiting until I get a break in the action to go back up and train with him. He's an unbelievable martial artist, a fantastic human being, and has become a dear friend of mine. And really, for me, epitomizes all that is good and decent and right with martial arts. And I think the universe puts people together, and I've been very fortunate to find him. And I can't wait to go back up and train with him again. And I think probably if I do get on the trajectory towards getting a black belt, I would like to earn it with Sensei McKinley.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So I know you probably get asked a lot of these questions, so I'm trying to ask the questions that you're not always asked, but I'm just curious, did you enjoy playing a bad guy? I mean, obviously that's one of your most iconic roles.
I did.
That has to be fun.
Yeah. It was a lot of fun.
Nice. You're obviously a super nice guy, so I imagine it's completely different
you.
than what you are in real life.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. I'm very much not that guy. Like I said, I was bullied a lot when I was younger, and to later go on to play this iconic bully is sort of, I don't know if ironic is the right word, but it's certainly strange.
It's fun.
But it was a lot of fun. Yeah. I mean, I always say this. Look, I was the guy that bought a ticket to see the Karate Kid and the Karate Kid 2 in the theaters, and then to suddenly be there and be the guy at the All Valley tournament with Daniel-san was surreal and amazing and invigorating and all of that incredible stuff.
Yeah, that was definitely an iconic friend. I mean, it's the reason I got started in martial arts, the original Karate Kid.
Yeah.
There was an instructor handing out free passes outside of the movie theater opening night. I'm like,
oh wow.
Yeah, it was like smart marketing back in 1984. I'm like, wow, yeah, I know. I'm like, oh cool, free 30 days. I'm going to try this. So yeah, that was the start of my martial arts career.
And for many other people too.
Oh, I would imagine.
Yeah.
There's you look back at probably each decade. There's that in the 80s, maybe the Ninja Turtles or Mortal Kombat in the 90s.
Ninja Turtles.
Yeah. I remember Mortal Kombat when that opened. A local school did a demonstration outside of the theater, and they were like jumping off walls and breaking boards and stuff. And I'm like, oh, they're gonna get some students.
Right.
It's smart. So when did the writing start for you? Was the Black Belt article first, or did you start writing?
No,
and what kind of led to it?
No, I've written for as long as I can remember. I went to boarding school and for 2 years, for my junior and senior year. Went to public school the years before that. And I started writing then, and I actually started writing some pieces which I went back and looked on years later, and they formed the impetus for the first film that I wrote, which was called Chasing Holden. It's about a young boy who runs away from boarding school to go find J.D. Salinger.
Oh, wow.
And he had been released. He's the son of the governor of New York, had been released from a mental institution, and he steals a gun. And so the whole story is you're not quite sure if he's going to assassinate J.D. Salinger or, if what he's going to do. So anyway, my writing started really early. I'm one of the head writers on the show that I created, Studio City, which is on Amazon Prime. We were really fortunate and won the Emmy for outstanding limited fiction this past Emmy season.
That's awesome.
I write. I mean, my third book now. And I don't know. It's like, the entertainment industry is really difficult. And one of the things that has kept me sane in this crazy journey is that I don't do just one thing. I act, I produce, I write. And, when any one of them is firing on all pistons, you're really fortunate. And when a couple are happening at the same time, it's a dream. But, there have been times in my career when the acting just wasn't really happening. And I would say, okay, fine, I'm going to work on the writing for a little while. And that way, I feel like I'm always making forward progress.
Okay. So now looking at the 3 books you've written, they all kind of, not really not identical. I don't want to say that, but they're kind of under the category of, like, I would say, like motivational or self-help. All talking about different topics, of course, but they're all kind of like, so is that something you obviously love, encouraging people and motivating people and stuff, because that's a big part of your writing?
I do. One of the things I talk about in Way of the Cobra is the necessity to clarify your why. What is your why? It's that thing that gets you out of bed in the morning with passion. I don't need an alarm clock to get out of bed. I get out because I can't wait to start my day. For me, I have 2 whys. My first, all I have to do is look down at my left hand. I look at my wedding ring, and it's my commitment to my wife, to our marriage. I never want to see a look of buyer's remorse on my wife's face. And so that's one of my driving whys. My other is to inspire people. I truly love inspiring and helping people. And I think, determining what your why is so important towards the goal of achieving success. Your why is, if success is the destination, your why is, the fuel that fills the vehicle to get you there.
Okay. I'm loving the book. I was hoping to have it done by now, but our mail service is horrible, and it came about 6 days later than it was supposed to. So yeah,
well, good. I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Yeah. So yeah, but I'm about probably 80% through it so far. And I love those kind of books. I love motivational books. I mean, like I told you when we were communicating, I used to read about a book a week. I'm trying to get back into that. Slowed down just because I've been doing so many other things, but I'm loving it, and I've already recommended it to 3. I got a kind of, not really a book club, but I got some friends that we always recommend books to each other, and that was one of the first ones I recommended last week. So hopefully get you some new readers on that one too.
I really appreciate that.
And it just quick, you want to shout out the website where they can find the book? And I'll put it in the show notes too. So
I really appreciate that. The website is wayofthecobra.com. And, I do a lot of podcasts and interviews and things about the book because, of course, I want to sell books as everybody who has a book does. But, honestly, I want to get this book into as many people's hands as possible. I know that the information in this book is catalytic. I hear from people literally all over the world, from Pakistan to Ireland, that the book has had a profound effect on their lives, and they're making paradigm changes in their life and achieving success that they never had achieved before. And that makes me feel really good. And I just want to get it to as many people as I can.
Well, I can honestly, just from hearing you talk about it, the passion, I can tell you obviously you love it and you love doing that. So I'm continued success on that for sure. So, and we definitely got to mention the new movie with Bruce Willis. I watched the trailer right before we started this, and it looks really good. I'm actually kind of excited. I love Bruce Willis anyway, but it looks like a great movie. Just talk a little bit about that and what it was like working with Bruce.
This has been a really incredible year. If you would have told me at the beginning of this year of a pandemic that I was going to wind up doing back-to-back films with Bruce Willis, I would have said, "Hey, thanks for the vote of confidence," but I don't think that's going to happen. And a friend of mine who's a director directed the film. His name is James Cullen Bressack, and he said, "Look, I'm doing this film with Bruce. I'm actually doing a couple films with Bruce in Puerto Rico. And I think I got something that would be fun for you to do." And so I went to Puerto Rico, and we created this role that really wasn't in the script the way it was written. I'm supposed to play this thuggish bad guy, and I sort of decided that this guy was going to be the comedy relief along with another character. And that sort of merged into me doing this accent and all this other stuff, and it became really, really fun. So I did that. I came back to Los Angeles, and about a month and a half later, was asked back to do another film with Bruce called The Fortress. Yeah, look, like you, I grew up watching Bruce Willis's films. He's an icon. It was just exciting and fun, and he was very nice, and I was extremely flattered to be working with him.
That's awesome. And do you know where is that? Is that in theaters now, or is it online?
Yeah, it came out in about 15 theaters, select theaters across the country, and now it's on all the video on demand platforms. I know it's on Dish. I know it's it's on a bunch of them. I would actually have to look it up, but I'll just Google it. And you can find it. It's
I'll
out
find
there.
Some links for you, and we'll put them in the show
out there
notes
and easy to watch. And I've got a mohawk in it, so it's
I had to watch the trailer twice because you showed me the picture, and I'm like, that's not him. I'm like, oh my god, that is
me. Yeah. So the director kept teasing me, saying, when you get here, we're giving you a haircut, and I was like, okay. All right, whatever. I usually get a haircut before I start a production, and that haircut was what you saw. And I got to tell you, I kind of dug the mohawk. I got back to my wife, and she's like, "All right, you've worn this thing around Palm Springs for a week now, and you look like a maniac. And I want you to go and get like a proper haircut." And I was like, "Well, a proper haircut? I've got no hair except for like a landing strip down the middle of my head. So a proper haircut is me shaving it all off." And she's like, "Go, I'll pay."
Nice,
but I liked it.
That's awesome. That's actually hilarious. Now, you mentioned comedic relief. I do have to mention, I had forgot when I was reading your bio that you had done stand-up comedy. I remember the first time I saw a clip of you was probably in the early to mid 90s, and I remember seeing it.
Oh, wow.
I forgot which of the shows it was. I saw it on. You were doing it somewhere on one of those TV things back then, and I was like, "That's Mike Barnes doing stand-up comedy," and it was hilarious. Now, do you still have make time to do that at all, or?
I right before the pandemic, the day before everything shut down in Los Angeles, and I remember it was January 23rd, I was headlining at the Belly Room at the Comedy Store on Sunset, and it was great. I had all these gigs booked, and then everything shut down, and those unfortunately all went away. And that's when I poured myself into getting Way of the Cobra finished. I am definitely going to go back out on the road and do a bunch of comedy shows. I probably won't do it until mid next year, although I think I might do one in May. I might headline at the Atlantic City Comedy Club in May.
Nice.
It's just tough for me to find the time to get away and go do it on the road, but I love doing it. It's just that immediate reciprocity with the audience. There's no cut, there's no curtain. It's like you and a microphone, sink or swim. And I love it. And for me, when I was about 15 years old, I snuck into my first comedy club and I was just spellbound. I mean, watching these guys using just their words to, mesmerize an audience. And I was like, that's amazing. I'd like to do that. And it's turned out to be one of the smartest things I've ever done as an actor, because that combined with writing, a lot of times you get on a project, you read the script and you look at it and say, hey, I can make this better. And that's ultimately the actor's job, to elevate the words on the page to be the very best they can be. And so the ability to do some writing and infuse some comedy into things that might not necessarily ostensibly on the page call for comedy can put a whole new spin on stuff. And when you see Survive the Game, you'll see that, I took the character and tried to really make him into someone very off type and funny. And I wrote almost 90% of my own dialogue on that film.
Wow.
And it was great. And that's a testament to the director, James Cullen Bressak, who gave me the latitude and freedom to do that.
That's awesome. Yeah. And anyone who can get up on stage with a mic and do that. And I used to have major stage fright. I can get up and talk in front of people, but I could never do stand-up comedy. So much respect for that.
What's funny is, a lot of people want to do stand-up and they say, well, my friends tell me I'm funny. And it ain't the same thing. You know what I mean? It's like, there's a whole, I have incredible respect for guys that are comedians and that's all they do. And they're doing it, 300 nights a week. And yeah, it's daunting, but it's addictive.
Nice. So now, obviously, with Cobra Kai and this massive surge of popularity that's come back out with the whole Karate Kid franchise lately, two questions I want to ask you that hopefully you haven't been asked before. I've looked through interviews and I haven't seen these yet, but the two-part question. First of all, they talked about doing like more sequels and more spinoffs over the years, and they all got shot down. So when you first heard Cobra Kai was coming out, what was your initial thought? And then what was your thought after actually watching it?
I was really excited. The guys that created this, Hayden Schlossberg, Josh Held, John Hurwitz, have an amazing background in comedy. And the first time I the first time I knew who they were was when I watched Harold and Kumar. And then I went to go see Hot Tub Time Machine with a bunch of friends. And I don't know if you remember, but there's a line where one of the characters kind of bumps into this guy with a sort of blonde flat top. And he's like, hey, that guy looks like the douchebag from Karate Kid 3.
Yep.
And so all my friends immediately look at me and I was like, all right, that was funny. And when I found out these were the guys doing Cobra Kai, I was like, well, this is going to be interesting because they're comedy guys. And, they completely turned the whole concept that LaRusso was bullied and Johnny was the bully on its head. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that has made the show so unbelievably successful. Another, huge facet as to why it's successful is that, Ralph Macchio and Billy Zabka are incredibly good actors, gifted actors. They both have a really good facility for comedy. Both of them, and they kind of play opposite sides of the same coin. And another brilliant thing that the creators have done, which is super hard, is they've straddled the fence between creating a show that plays to guys like you and me, that for us, it's nostalgic mm-hmm. because we grew up with it. And for a new generation of young kids who certainly never saw the films in the theater, and they've created this whole new sensibility about the Karate Kid universe for another generation, and they play it very effectively because catering to two different age demographics is not easy.
True.
The reference, the benchmark references are different. Pop culture has changed, all of that, and they do that so well. And one of the things I really like about it, because I can relate to it, is the anachronistic quality of Johnny Lawrence. He's very much a guy who sort of peaked in the 80s. And thinks that the 80s was the greatest decade, from everything from the music he likes to the car he drives.
I would agree.
And I can really, I can really relate to that. My wife said something really obvious yet telling to me. She said, "Do you realize that the '80s is to you what the '50s was to your parents?" I was like, "Oh my God, you're right." Because, my dad used to always say, the best music, it's from the '50s and Bobby Darin and blah, 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 blah. And, it just sounds like, hey, kids, get off my grass. And I'm now that guy.
Me too. Although I do appreciate the music of the 50s and 60s too. That's, I grew up listening to that. So nice. So now I do remember one of the early UFCs. I think I remember like 3 or 4, or maybe even 2 that you were there watching and being interviewed. So I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on MMA and kind of how it's impacted the martial arts over the last 20, 30 years.
I was at UFC 1 in Denver. Okay. I was there at UFC 1. It was incredibly violent. There were none of the rules that are in place now. The fighters were amazing fighters, but they weren't, with the exception of maybe Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie, they weren't the athletes that the guys are now, and they weren't multi-discipline trained, most of them. So you'd have a guy that's a karate guy versus a sambo wrestler. I mean, now to have success in the UFC, you have to, of course, be an expert in wrestling, jiu-jitsu, stand up, so the guys that are now in the game and have been for the last, I don't know, more than a decade are just a different breed. I love MMA.
Nice.
I do. I think it's amazing. If I had one, I don't even want to say criticism, but one thing that I'd like to, a lot of the guys in MMA do have traditional martial arts backgrounds. And, I think that the tradition of martial arts is really important. And I think that it would be, nice to see some of that imparted by these guys that have become international stars. But I'm in awe of all of them. I think any guy that's got the balls to walk into a cage, close the door with another guy who wants to take your head off has my respect, win, lose, or draw.
Yeah, 100%. That's another thing too. Like, I used to judge MMA fights. I've judged over 1,000 MMA fights, but I would never step in that cage.
Yeah.
So nothing but respect for anyone who does. So
absolutely.
Nice. So if you had to pick, I know we kind of talked about a couple, but if you had to pick one martial artist to put on the top of your list for someone you just truly admire, who would it be on the top of that list?
Ooh.
And it doesn't have to be someone you've actually trained with. It can be, like a lot of people pick Bruce Lee. It can be someone
I'd have to pick a couple. I mean, certainly Bruce Lee. For many reasons, Bruce Lee. But one of the things I like the most about him is that, he overcame tremendous adversity in his life, not the least of which was the, devastating back injury he had, which laid him up for months. And that's when he, I believe, wrote his first book. But he's a phenomenal philosopher. I don't know if you've ever read a book he wrote called Striking Thoughts.
Yep.
But Bruce Lee is so much more than just a martial artist. And also, he was poised to be a mainstream movie star at a time when nobody wanted to see an Asian man as the lead in a film. And, had he lived, I think, this renaissance that has happened with Asian actors that I think was precipitated by Crazy Rich Asians and some of the other films, I think that would have happened decades ago. Chuck Norris, whom I worked with on Walker, Texas Ranger, I'll never forget. My dad, when I was a little boy, gave me a signed photo of Chuck that said, "Dear Sean, keep on kicking."
Nice.
And decades later, I was in a fight scene with Chuck on Walker, Texas Ranger down in Texas, and it just was mind-blowing.
That's cool.
Phenomenal martial artist, phenomenal human being. Oh boy, there's so many. Fumio Demura.
Yeah.
I mean, he is a modern day samurai. My teacher, Sensei William Stoner, my other sensei, Adam McKinley. These are guys that I just have enormous respect for and am in awe of what they're able to do.
It is hard to pick one. I don't think any of my guests have ever picked just one.
It really is. I suppose ultimately I would have to go with Bruce Lee.
Nice. Okay. Do you have a favorite martial arts book?
Do I have a favorite martial arts book? Well, I really like Striking Thoughts. It's not a martial arts book per se, but it's written by Bruce Lee. I remember as a kid reading a book written by Masayama. That was kind of one of the first martial arts books that I had read. Zen in the Art of Archery, which I think is metaphoric not only for life, obviously, but certainly martial arts. Yeah, those are a couple of them.
Okay. Do you have a favorite? I would say you can't pick Cobra Kai. A favorite martial arts TV show?
Kung Fu.
The original, I'm assuming.
The original Kung Fu, of course. Yeah.
Now, did you ever watch the sequel in the early '90s? The Legend Continues?
I'll tell you a funny story. David Carradine and I had the same agent, and before the show was ultimately filmed in Canada, and it was going to be filmed in the United States, I was a very strong contender for possibly playing his son, which was ultimately played by an actor named Chris Potter. Yeah. And my agent brought me out to David's ranch in La Tuna Canyon, and we spent the day together, and that was an experience that I will never forget. David answered the door in a kimono, barely covering his nether regions, and had a highball of vodka with him. And there was a horse that was poking its head through the window in the kitchen. Some random guy was walking around with a 6-gun attached to his leg. And David and I hung out, and he said, "Hey, let's go. Do you ride horses?" And I said, "Yeah." And David got up on a horse and was riding and promptly fell off and did a perfect roll and got up. And I think then he might have mentioned something about working with swords, and I think I very wisely, politely declined. But the show moved to Canada, which meant they had to hire a Canadian actor to be his son. So unfortunately, I didn't get that role, and I was really disappointed. I mean, that would have been an amazing opportunity and experience to star with David Carradine, the remake of Kung Fu.
That's a great story. All right, so same kind of clause. You can't pick one of the Karate Kid movies, but favorite martial arts movie?
Ooh, favorite martial arts movie. Well, I am a big fan of Way the Cobra. That's my book. Way the Cobra. WayTheCobra.com. Enter the Dragon. Yes. I would say John Wick. I mean, I consider that in many ways to be a martial arts film. I mean, Keanu's amazing in those films. And I think the last one had who was his name? Mark Dacascos, who was great.
Yes.
And Bloodsport. Fun, just fun. Yep. I'm also a fan of the Billy Jack films.
Yes.
Billy Jack, Tom Laughlin was an amazing, iconoclastic human being. And while it wasn't the most dynamic and visually compelling martial arts that you've ever seen in a film, the character for me was just so cool and really embodied the very best essence of martial arts. What else? I mean, going back, the 7 Deadly Venoms. I love. Saturday afternoon Kung Fu theater was real popular with me when I was a kid.
Nice.
So those are some of them.
You got some good ones in there. Final question. So, is there a philosophy you've learned in all your years of martial arts that really stands out for you?
The one that comes to mind the most is something that Sensei Demura said, and I appropriated it for my book, Way the Cobra, and it's get knocked down 7 times, get up 8. Learning martial arts is a very difficult pursuit. It's very frustrating in the beginning. It's frustrating throughout in a lot of ways, but the ability to continue to come back and try harder, and I think is metaphoric for life. Nobody gets out of life without getting knocked down. And it's those who are able to get back up and learn from it, and that's something that has always stayed with me. And I think probably the other overriding umbrella concept is respect, being respectful and compassionate of others. That martial arts is primarily for defense and to be used with judiciousness, and kind of with great power comes great responsibility, that sort of thing.
Right.
So that's all stuff that I've taken with me.
Great answer. Well, and before we end it, just any last minute things. I know, like I said, I'll put the website for the book out there. Anything else you want to plug that you have coming up?
So when is this interview going to be posted?
So Well, I can do it sooner if you want me to, but normally it's about 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
But I can definitely do sooner if we have to.
No, that's okay. Just for those people who want to see me doing something very different than Mike Barnes, you can tune in and watch me on The Bold and the Beautiful on CBS. Nice. I'm reprising my role as bad boy Deacon Sharp, and Deacon has been known to use martial arts a few times on the show, and I would love to get as many people from the Karate Kid Cobra Kai universe to check me out doing something different. And please check out my book, Way the Cobra, at waythecobra.com.
Nice. Well, I just want to thank you. This has been so much fun. It's been a blast talking about you and hearing about your past and everything you're involved with. It's been an honor to have you on.
Ryan, thank you so much. I want to wish you much continued success, and thank all of your listeners for their support. And I hope we can do this again at some point.
I would love that. Maybe after you get your black belt, we'll come on and talk about your black belt.
All right, my friend. Listen, take care of yourself, and I look forward to our paths crossing again.
Thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist. We hope you will join us every week for a brand new episode with a different martial artist telling their story. If you enjoy the show, be sure to leave us a review. Also, be sure to check out our website at everydaymartialartist.com. There you can find all of our episodes and contact us to suggest guests and ask questions. Again, thanks for listening to Everyday Martial Artist, and we'll see you next week.